Hey everyone, George here, the Disney Family Man, coming to you with another exciting video. And today I have back on once again my good friend VashSky. Hey Vash, how you doing?
Happy to be here, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining once again. And before we get on with today's topic, that this just came very funny to me, that I have to clarify that Vash and I just recently did a video on the upcoming Avengers campus opening at Disney California Adventure. And it's still a great watch. Please check it out. I'll link it at the end of this video. But we were talking about pretty much our ideal of when the land would be open. We were kind of anticipating a fall, winter possibly opening. Well, lo and behold, Disney threw us another curveball in this crazy chain that we're going through society right now. And Avengers Campus is officially opening on June 4th of this year. Yes, in less than 2 months, that land will be open. And that just threw a curveball into my expectations because I was not expecting that at all. How about you?
I believe I'm the one that made the prediction. So, no, that definitely threw me for a loop a little bit. And look, as I've kind of reiterated in past appearances on both your and Orange Grove's channel, the nowadays the Disney company's moving so fast. It's all moving so quickly. Things are changing literally on the fly. What was true last week might not, be true now. It's there's so many different moving parts right now. There's so many different changing circumstances, and I think they just kind of evaluated and said, well, "This is going to be the date." And I was as stunned as probably anybody else. So I'm glad you had that addendum put in here. I think it's good to correct the record, and it's truly exciting for it.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait. And it's a nice breath of fresh air, so to speak, to know that Disney is pulling out all the stops. They're really pushing their own expectations to get things up and running. And the faster that Disney does this, then we can start to see, hey, the revenue's coming in, Disney's getting back on its feet, and that's what we want. The more that it opens, the better it is for the company.
Absolutely, better it is for the guest experience as well. A lot of these things that we so love and enjoy, you really got to have some cash flow coming in. So the sooner they're allowed to open, the sooner they're allowed to really get their feet under themselves and really start to open these parks up broadly. And have new attractions to do it and bring in attendance. It's better for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, folks, just remember June 4th, the grand opening of Avengers Campus, but still check out our conversation. It was a really good in-depth conversation of just the land itself. So I definitely highly recommend. I'll link it at the end of this video. Please check it out. So today I thought we'd talk about another land, kind of going over to DCA's sister park, Disneyland. And it's a part of the park that doesn't really get a whole lot of recognition, really. It's been the same land since its opening, but now we're starting to see some heartbeat, some pulse get back to this land, and it is Mickey's Toontown, or also known just as Toontown. And it's now going to start breathing some new life with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. It's going to be a replica of what's done in Florida. And but I always enjoyed the land itself, even before they announced with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And I think it's a very underrated part of the park. It was big in its day, but I think a lot of people just kind of sorely forgot about it. What are your thoughts on it?
No, that's a pretty accurate viewpoint. I've been going to Disneyland for since I was a little kid, and so as a little one, having that land open was a real kind of treat and dream come true. There were so many interactive elements. There were such great, what do I want to say? There's such a great energy, vibrance, and life to it. Back when it first opened, and unfortunately, it kind of really declined. There was a famous time period where things were being cut, but also too there was a new kind of safety oriented society or culture growing, and because of that, some of the things that you could maybe get away with in the 1970s or 1980s really weren't applicable in the 1990s in the way they probably envisioned. So going into Mickey's Toontown and kind of seeing it on opening day was a real treat, and to kind of see its rapid decline was really sad. They we'll get into more details of it, but they took out like the acorn ball pit, or they took out the slide for Chippendale's Treehouse next door, and those kind of declines. Really, I think that's kind of what really assisted in creating that perception of this. Well, it's kind of an older land, and let's do some of the other things. And meanwhile, that kind of almost neglect really kind of hurt it in the eyes of guests. So to see Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway come out, I mean, this is going to be a huge rebirth, and hopefully it means that a new life is imbued into Mickey's Toontown, not just through a new attraction, but maybe some, whether it's restoring old things or creating entirely new ones to really bump up the quality level for this new attraction. It's really, really exciting.
Now, let me ask you this: that when the part of that park first opened, it was designed to have this feel sort of like as a promotional deal for 1988's Robert Zemeckis film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It had like that feel of Toontown, and where Mickey and Minnie's houses and Goofy's bounce house and everything, Donald's boat and everything. So when you have that kind of architectural style that's been there for almost about 30 years, and then you're going to have an attraction that's now based on the newer style of Mickey Mouse, do you think that's going to kind of throw everything off, that eventually that the land will then get this whole upgrade based on the newer type of animation?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because you have the kind of far more whimsical and rounded architectural styles of the squash and stretch of Toontown, going back to that famous Robert Zemeckis film, and then you have the kind of new school. Uh, Really, I mean, it's kind of retro, but it's very straight edged. The Mickey Mouse shorts, which Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is based on. There is, I would say, there is a potential for clash, but knowing the Imagineers, I think they'll kind of juxtapose those quite well. I think you know going into the queue will set you up for, okay, while this is in Toontown, this does have a style of its own, and there will be kind of a transition period to to make it feel more integrated into the land. I also think too, this is why I'm kind of thinking, or at least this is the way I was thinking before, the pandemic, of course, changed a few things. I think Toontown itself will take on the kind of identity of this new attraction closer. Um, and I think the best way is going to be a repaint and maybe a change to that um, um, previous Mountain Ranger facade that took place in the back of the land. Uh, Before the park shut down, that whole facade, that whole what do you want to say, that background element that was almost placed above a lot of the architectural elements of the back half of the land, that created the kind of cityscape slash hillscape of Toontown. That was taken down, and we really don't know the height and how that all relates. But I think between kind of those two elements, if they do it correctly and provide a facade for the building itself, which is massive, and creates that kind of background and kind of set those things up. I think between those two, the painting and so forth, I think that will integrate those styles much better than just dropping this in.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was wondering, like, when they first announced that they were going to put Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in a way, I kind of thought that that was going to be part of the newer type of Fantasyland that they would have eventually went towards, because there was a lot of talk that
Mhm.
Fantasyland was going to get an update and an expansion along with Tomorrowland. So when they said Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and they said, well, it's going to be put in Toontown. Again, that's when I kind of took a step back and I was like, whoa, I actually thought Toontown was going to be done for. Like, I literally thought Toontown was going to be the new expansion of Fantasyland, because it's like right off of Fantasyland and what have you. But now that they're actually putting Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in there, it's safe to say that Toontown is not going to be touched, which in a way I am glad.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, there were talks of replacing it outright for, when Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was, it was like, where are we going to place this thing? And there were talks that it was going to absorb Toontown, that it was going to close, and that would have been that. Thankfully, they kind of moved the site and, did it in a way that preserved Toontown, at least for the moment. And obviously, okay, well, if there's a big expansion here, maybe it takes over there, and so forth. But no, they saved it. And when Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway was going in, yeah, I mean, I had similar thoughts. It's like, okay, well, does Toontown make the cut then? Even though it could be integrated into the land, obviously there's not much land back there to do a ride of this immense scale. And so, it was like, well, Disney's rights with Roger Rabbit, it's kind of a complex issue. Does Roger Rabbit make the cut? Does that get taken out? Do other things get taken out to do this if it is going to be integrated in the land? And surprisingly enough, no, they moved a lot of the backstage facilities behind Toontown, directly behind Toontown, out of there to offsite locations, and boom, it's going to be in Toontown proper. And I think not only does this mean that the future of Toontown's safe, but it could be, like I said, a new lease on life. It could be something where, hey, look, no, it's, we're not getting rid of Toontown. We might actually be getting an upgrade in Toontown along with this new attraction. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
It really is. And it's one of those things where I'm glad you actually brought Roger Rabbit up and everything, because it's almost like, I mean, for how big of a hit that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was, as time slowly went on, Roger became practically a mute in the park, so to speak. Like, you say to kids today, oh, do you like Roger? Roger who? Who's Roger Rabbit? I know, Bugs Bunny, but I don't know Roger Rabbit, So it's like one of those things where, he was very heavily into the park, even down at Walt Disney World, at the studios for a period of time. Roger was present at some form or another. And even like during, and I'm going to sound kind of dated myself, but going back as a child watching the Disney sing-along songs for the Disneyland Fun, Roger Rabbit was one of the main characters, along with the Fab Five, when they opened the park and everything. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So now to actually see him, not anywhere, but only in that part of the park, it almost kind of worried me, because I love Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. And to even imagine, to think if that ride was to be taken out, that's the last little bit of Roger Rabbit in the park. And if that goes, Roger's completely unexistent in the Disney park.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up Disney Studios. I mean, there were plans to really bring out Roger Rabbit in a big, big way to both Disney's Hollywood Studios, and eventually we did see that on the West Coast in Disneyland. But I mean, they had big plans. They had, a kind of a motion simulator trolley attraction. There was the baby buggy attraction that they were working on. I mean, there were some big things in store for Roger. He had just made an incredible splash on the scene, and really was incredibly popular. That's why you saw him with the Fab Five. And for some of those celebrations, I believe that some of the celebrations at the time incorporate Roger Rabbit in a huge way, not just for promotion of his film, but for the promotion of the park and so forth. I mean, he was a really major character, and unfortunately, that falling out with Steven Spielberg, that really did him in. I mean, there's just, when you don't have complete rights and total control of a character, how do you integrate them? How do you leverage that popularity successfully? And Disney's really
And
never.
this is the second time that Disney has got burned by losing rights to two rabbits.
Yeah, that is true. Going back to Oswald. Oh, of course, absolutely. They just never have that success now, do they? They just never they never figure out the rabbit game. But it's just one of those things. It's like you had this incredible character, but when that 50% ownership on the other half just does not want to play ball, what are you going to do? And so a lot of those ideas were scrapped, and thankfully the one thing we could get was Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, and it was an incredible attraction. I believe it was what is it, when they were developing ideas for Mickey's Toontown. Roger Rabbit was always a key component. Previously, it was going to be Toontown and then Mickey's Starland. As separate entities, but then they combine them together in that great way. So you have the kind of the Roger Rabbit portion in what they call like the urban metropolis setting or downtown, and then you have the residential area for the Fab Five characters, and they kind of bring them together, just really successfully implemented. But that ride is, man, it's just incredible. If you look at the facade, and if you look at the exterior in the second half, you'll actually see almost where there are kind of doors embedded in it. And really, that was for a concept where almost like Alice in Wonderland and Fantasyland, Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin was going to go outside for a small portion of it and then go back in. That's why you have the car kind of swinging out there, as if that did happen, and maybe one of them was unsuccessful. It was just there's just such great history with that attraction. I really hope they kind of keep it and refresh it. Who knows with Roger Rabbit, but it's an incredible legacy, if anything.
Yeah, it really, I am hoping and hoping that it sticks around much longer than, because I thought it was going to be completely out out the door along with the whole entire Toontown. Because I'm going to be very honest with you, I was a late bloomer when it came for Disneyland. I've, being living on the East Coast, going to Walt Disney World my whole life. I knew of Disneyland, I knew of the history, I knew of, but I didn't really know too much of everything that was involved in with it. I just knew that Disneyland had Toontown. And when I would look at because back in the day, like when it was back in the day, I make myself sound like really old, but back in those days, that
Back
that
in them there days.
yeah,
Go ahead.
that when it would give like a name of a ride or attraction, like it didn't give like full explicit amount of like what the attraction's about. So when I saw Gadget's Go Coaster, I did know of Chippendale Rescue Rangers. I did know of Gadget, but in that moment, it just didn't click with me because I'm thinking they would never make an attraction based off of a character from a TV show. So, but in my mind, I'm thinking Gadget's Go Coaster. What does Inspector Gadget have to do with Toontown? Because it was like I had Inspector Gadget in my mind. And it was
Oh, I
like
see. I see.
so it was like, and when I actually physically got there and I saw what type of coaster it is, I'm like, oh, Gadget, from Rescue Rangers. Now that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Oh yeah, and for a while there, this is what prompted the conversation. That was the only real attraction in there outside of the Jolly Trolley, of course, but really the only attraction, like a ride, I should say, was Gadget's Go Coaster, and it, I mean, I think it's a darling little coaster. It's pretty much Goofy's Barnstormer over in Walt Disney World, but it is kind of wild to think, like you said, like you base your a significant portion of your new land not on characters from animated films or movies or whatever. It's off the TV show. That's really, to put it in perspective, folks, that's how big it was back then. It was like, hey, Disney Afternoon, here we go. Boom, it's in there. Oh, I believe you're
Yeah.
muted, so
Yes,
okay.
but yeah, that was like really like one of those things where it just it boggled my mind to the fact of okay, so this is Gadgets Coasters and then Roger Rabbit. So you have like these two entities of something that was popular back in the day, was popular in the late 80s and early 90s, but for it to carry on through now, and for even how Toontown, you know, stood the test of time even right now, that it heavenly, I can't talk. See what happens with the mind. It heavily
But yeah.
relied on, it heavily relied on two rides that kids nowadays can't really say that they can relate to, so
Yeah.
it's like one of those things. But the fact that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is, coming into the perspective, that I think it may bring the newer generation to that part of the park, so they could say, oh, Roger Rabbit, who's Roger Rabbit. It gives kids the the comprehension to ask questions.
Yeah, it's true. And there's always a chance, maybe Steven Spielberg is, more open to the idea of maybe selling his side of the rights, in this day and age. Who knows? I mean, these things could possibly happen. But, getting back to Roger and getting back to the history of this amazing land, like I said, I mean, Gadget's Go Coaster I mean, if you wanted to go on an attraction or ride proper in this new land, that was really it. It opened, I believe, in very early 1993, and the new dark ride that was going to be the kind of e-ticket of this land, the big new ride, didn't open until exactly like 1 year later. And the idea from Jack Lindquist's, who was the president at the time's perspective, was, okay, well, we're going to have Fantasmic 1992. We're going to have the opening of Mickey's Toontown in 1993. But then we don't have an attraction until Indiana Jones Adventure in 1995. So, what do we do for that 1 year? Well, he had the idea, okay, well, let's open Mickey's Toontown, and we'll open the attraction, even though it would have been completed at that point in 1994. So this was kind of a revolutionary idea, but if you think of it, it was very much based on local visitation. You really had to keep those, numbers as high as they could go. So that was kind of the idea. Well, they ended up kind of needing that time, because as I have heard it, and when they did the initial pour for the attraction, it's very interesting, because the ride vehicles, the place where you sit in the kind of Benny's cab that you sit in there, the portion that actually makes contact with the ground is actually underneath. It's actually below ground level. And so when they initially did that concrete pour for the foundation of where these ride vehicles would actually make their journey around the course, apparently there was a screw up, and it was a pretty rough ride. The concrete pour wasn't fully 100% smooth, and so they needed jackhammers and all kinds of stuff to get it to where it was actually rideable and playable. And it's just kind of imagineering. They're going to take a little bit of time. That's just kind of how it is. And so, to Jack Lindquist's credit, they actually did need that time a little bit there to get those bugs and kinks worked out. But it's not. It's one of those things. If you're thinking about delaying lands or attractions and so forth, that has happened in the past.
Yeah, it really has, because it's just like one of those things where you could think it's going to go one way, but it's like, you have to be ready for anything. And, you sometimes it delays, sometimes it could still open on time, even with a minor mishap, but, you never know. Now, let me ask you this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mickey's Toontown, has it always closed before the actual park initially closed? Was it one of the lands that would close early?
Yeah, so the reason it does that is because the fireworks launch point is like right behind it. And so you really get into an area where, if you can't, if you don't have 100% full control of where those fireworks go, which it's almost never a windless night in Anaheim, at least at that elevation, you could potentially have, uh, what is it, shell casings or so forth, fall on that area. So I believe in its early days, I don't think it was always meant to close that early, and I don't think it did. But as operations kind of kicked in, and really, I mean, that the back half of the park really, became more of a ghost town anyway. It just was decided, okay, let's close this a little bit earlier with the park. But that's kind of why it does close a little bit earlier. And from what I understand, the real question with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was, are they going to close this thing early like Mickey's Toontown for the fireworks? Because, I mean, if you have a new land, and especially as busy as popular as it was going to be, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, at least it was, that was the kind of notion going into it. Well, that reduced operation, reduces how many people can even experience the land. And so that was a kind of a big kind of problem. I think Disney did end up moving slightly where the fireworks actually launched to in the air, and then they actually moved the launch point to not only overcome those issues but to upgrade those facilities and technology and so forth. But it is interesting that you bring that up, because now it's like, okay, well, if you're going to have a new attraction, we're back at the same place, right? Are these things going to close early? My thought is probably not. And the reason I say that is, even with the operational hurdles created by pyrotechnics, if you've seen the kind of course of where the Disney company is going, we just had Shanghai debut their new Illuminate, or 5th anniversary fireworks. And if you saw there wasn't that much pyro. Still would be considered a fireworks show, but really they were more elements that enhance the actual presentation and not the actual main focal point. So this is kind of interesting. Will we see fireworks phased out completely? I don't think so. But if you have less pyro and you have more emphasis on other elements within the park, and you can kind of, I think there's YouTube videos of Illuminate to kind of see what those might be. You have less chance of things happening, and you can be creative with where you launch these fireworks to, and that potentially creates an opportunity to keep a land with an attraction like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and a land like Mickey's Toontown open for longer.
I agree with you on that notion. I think fireworks will continue to stay, but it almost seems like it became secondary to the nighttime shows, like where they use it, but they use it more as not as the front runner of the show, but sort of like just thrown in there, and it became more of the technological term of what they do with the castle projections and the music and the sound and the lighting and everything. So yeah, I could definitely see that happening, and especially with for how popular it is down in Florida, I'm for sure Disneyland for Toontown to actually now have a pulse that it'll definitely draw in some crowds back there.
Yeah, and it certainly will. I mean, it's going to be extremely popular, I'm sure. I mean, the reviews we're seeing out of Disney Hollywood Studios, it's just, I mean, it's a guest favorite. Guests love it. It's a nice family attraction, so it's kind of perfect for Toontown as well. Yeah, the little ones can ride it. The big, the big kids can ride it. So it's kind of a perfect addition to Disneyland. Perfect addition to I'm sorry, Mickey's Toontown. It is going to be interesting because Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is located kind of at the entrance of the park, whereas this is going to be all the way in the back. So that's going to be kind of interesting to see what the differences are there. But I think if they spruce up the surrounding area of Toontown itself along with that, I think they'll be fine. So we'll see.
Do you think in time that it will eventually get that newer type of style, like a little bit? Do you think Mickey and Minnie Runaway Railway is now the start of that new genesis, so to speak?
The new architectural styles for
Yeah.
the land.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they do any modification, it will probably be in that style. It'll probably be closer to that vision than kind of the historic vision for Toontown. It's interesting. The whimsical architecture is quite interesting. I mean, really look at it. There's virtually no straight edges in the entire land. I mean, all of that is using kind of the latest, architectural processes to bring that to life. It's really interesting. It's so you might see straighter edges. You might see, you'll still see whimsical. You'll still see squash and stretch, but it might be, like I said, the color palette might change to fit that style. It'll be reflected in the architecture to a certain extent, and I think that will be kind of, that's where it's going eventually.
Now, could it potentially be, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but
Mm.
could it actually be the start of where they may start integrating Toontown to not actually just stay as Toontown, but become a newer part of Fantasyland?
I don't think so.
I hope
I'm
not. I hope not. But
Yeah.
I think like after the fact that they said for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, I think it's pretty much safe to say that Toontown is safe.
I think so. There's always a chance. I mean, I have heard a concept where half of Toontown goes away, the residential portion of it, where you meet Mickey and so forth, which is kind of interesting because the whole reason why Mickey's Toontown exists really was to meet Mickey Mouse. But you would, I mean, possibly locate his facilities and so forth in a different venue. But you get rid of that half of, the resident, kind of city hall on down. And that I have heard in the past that was where the Frozen expansion was going to be. It was going to take place on that side and actually take over the Fantasyland Theater. And that introduces some things because you could finally, conceivably, you could connect Star Wars Galaxy's Edge to Mickey's Toontown through via that gateway, or another. You could use another way to do that, but that was kind of the idea. It was kind of interesting. I guess you would have to integrate those things to make that kind of thing conceivable. But as long as the railroad separates Fantasyland proper from Toontown proper, I think they'll keep their own styles.
Cool. Yeah, because that was another concern of mine because it's like the whole notion of why you're calling it Mickey's Toontown is you're going into Toontown to see where the characters live in their own kind of like organic natural habitat, so to speak.
Right.
So it's like one of those things where if you go in there, it's called Mickey's Toontown, and then you have, well, okay, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. So I do like the fact that because the way that ride is, it expands the horizon beyond just the city and the local portion of Toontown. It takes you like in the jungle or underneath the sea. So it kind of like gives you that notion of that, there's a bigger expansion of Toontown, so to speak, but doing it through the eyes in that attraction.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think that's going to be the most kind of profound thing to really deep dive into this world that we've only kind of seen from maybe a couple of perspectives, and I know Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway gives you a whole lot more. I mean, it really does dive into the world of the tunes, and it's a perfect not only complement but expansion for this idea, and it just I'm really, really excited. I've kind of been holding off on seeing any of the Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway footage because I know we're getting it. So I kind of want to be surprised as much as possible anyway. And so I don't know what it fully entails, but from what I understand, it's pretty impressive tech nonetheless.
Now, let me ask you this too: is for the location of the attraction itself. Now, it's going to be taking the place of the factory. That's right. Is it right by Roger Rabbit? It's been years since I've been there, so.
This is interesting. They just released the list of stores and restaurants and other facilities that will be open on day one of Disneyland's reopening on April 30th. Right, not everything's going to be open, but you're going to have plenty to do, and I guess we'll be, I'm sure, satisfied at least for the initial wave. But it was kind of interesting because I had heard that it was going to be the Gag Factory, where that was going to take place. And that's kind of an interesting location because, it's kind of tight in there as it is currently. There might be some modification to the surrounding area to kind of open that up and to kind of make that breezeway a little bit better. But I always thought it was a kind of an interesting location for those reasons. So I never really fully believed it. I always kind of thought, well, if you move down a little bit, you have City Hall and you have that big entrance, you know, almost promenade or plaza there. It's kind of a food court on the edges, but characters come out of, you know, sometimes, and but it's just this big plot that you could just, you know, you wouldn't have to do much modification to, right there, boom, in and out. But no, they were going to do the gag factory, and you know, as time has gone on, it's like, okay, well, that's probably what it's going to be. But then I think the biggest indicator was, if you look at that list of the opening facilities for the 30th, the gag factory was not on that list. So that, you know, it's like, have they started that? I mean, that building, it's very interesting. That building is done. It is fully enclosed. They're tiling the roof right now, or putting the cover on top, the weatherproof membrane that they put on. HVAC's going in. I mean, it is fully enclosed. You know, they're starting the big install inside. It's amazing how fast that's actually gone up, and that was one of the projects that was being completed this whole time. But you know, are they at a point where they're taking over that gag factory? Well, if you look at that list, might indicate that.
Now, is that where is it right by where Roger Rabbit is?
Yes. So the layout is, you walk into the Mickey's Toontown. Immediately on your, you know, left, if you walk down, that's the residential portion with Goofy's house, Donald's house, the Chippendale tree house, Mickey's house, and Minnie's house. You have City Hall in the middle there, and then you have, on your immediate right, you have the downtown portion. And there's kind of a four-sided group of buildings, kind of in the courtyard there. But then, as you move on, right in front of the fountain, there's the entrance to the Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, and it's ironically right next to the Jolly Charlie train station that used to be there, and that's a really sad thing. But anyway, that's where it was. And if you look at, I believe, yeah, you have the entrance to Roger Rabbit, and then you have a couple of boxes that you could interact with. And then a little bit past that, you have the exit to Roger Rabbit, and Roger Rabbit exits right next to the gag factory, because that was going to be the you know, that was going to be, hey, you exit into the gift shop. That's the purpose that serves. And so, and then you had the electrified door that if you pull, you know, kind of shocks and stuff like that. It's kind of cool thing about Mickey's Toontown. A lot of it's, you know, very, very interactive. But anyway, that is where the gag factory is, located right next to the exit of Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin.
Now, will that eventually cause congestion as far as lining up? Will you have to actually enter through the building first where the queue line starts, or is it?
Well, they have shown a facade, and it's very interesting because if you see that facade concept artwork, it's like it's going after what's Disney's theater called in downtown in Hollywood. It's called.
It's going to be the El Capitan.
El Capitan. Yeah, it's supposed to evoke that kind of imagery. Really, really fun. But it's much more open than if you know that area, it gets really tight in there. So, I mean, I would guess, you know, I'm guessing they're going to have a store, because some kind of store type experience, because they have to. There's really no store or anything like that sells that kind of merchandise anywhere else in Mickey's Toontown. So that's why I always thought, like, man, the gag factory is such a strange location. But if I were kind of thinking in the box here, my guess is there's kind of a delineating group of buildings just adjacent to the gag factory, going from east to west. And so if I had to guess, I would guess that the entrance would be closer to the City Hall portion, and the exit would be closer to the electrified fence, exit to Roger Rabbit's, cartoon spin on that side. So you kind of enter into the city hall section. That's where the facade would be, and then you exit through previously what was the gag factory. That if I had to kind of guess, that's what it would be. It's really interesting though. Really look at that layout. George's kind of has kind of indicated, it is very, very tight.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder because like when I saw the first initial piece of concept art when they showed the El Capitan theater at D23. And I'm thinking when they were describing it to me, and again, I'm not too familiar with Disneyland's layout as much as I am with Walt Disney World, but it just made like dawned on me to think that's going to be a pretty tight squeeze for like a e-ticket attraction. So it's like one of those things. It's like, how are they going to do this? And then just finding out what they're doing with Avengers Campus, opening it on June 4th. Now, this makes me wonder that could Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway open ahead of its schedule? Because as you said, the building's already done exterior wise. They're just pretty much filling the meat and potatoes, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean the show still has to be installed. They still have to program that, but a lot of the learning curve that came into Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in its initial concept, I mean, it was delayed, and part of that delay was just kind of getting those effects to work. Getting having those effects really take shape on it always worked when you were standing still, but it didn't really translate when you were moving, and you had to be really careful about your movements and so forth. So it was kind of programming that. A lot of that though, that's now institutional memory. That's they've learned those mistakes, and they'll apply that programming, those just the setup of the show could be much faster than how it went in Disney's Hollywood Studios for that reason. From what I understand, they're still getting a lot of that show installed though. So while the building is complete, and you don't have to worry about the kind of construction umbilicus that you would with an operating theme park and so forth, and you can just kind of ship, kind of move things in an orderly fashion. It will still take time to get those things installed and set up and programmed and so forth. So I'm hopeful that it's maybe sooner than what the indication is, but I really don't know.
We'll just have to wait and see, because it's going to be one of those things where Disney pulls off some of their magic and pixie dust, and it's like somehow, some way they get it done. We don't know how they do it, but they get it done.
Right, and I hope they do with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I know people are upset about Tron and Guardians of the Galaxy and how long those attractions are taking, and hopefully Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway is not that way. Hopefully it kind of does get in, kind of has the budget applied to it to kind of get these things done in a timely fashion, and hopefully it all plays off. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, and especially because just recently, Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro had said, speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind and the Harmonia show at Epcot. Now, the term coming soon, that could be any time from to 2023. Yeah. But I find it kind of interesting that he brought that up when no one asked about it. And he said, just specifically Guardians and Harmonious is coming soon. He didn't mention anything of Tron, but a lot of people are suspecting Tron's going to be in 2022. But I wonder if they're more now pushing maybe Guardians and Harmonious might even open a little bit even before Tron does.
Oh yeah. At this point, Tron is definitely going to be the last to open of the three. It's just, it's really unfortunate because I mean they had like $25 billion in capital expenditures in the theme parks division alone. I mean, it's just a huge number across all their parks all over the world, development within Imagineering and so forth. And when that money, when that revenue stops, I mean, we indicated, we touched on it earlier. When that cash flow stops, it's like, man, you got to make some tough decisions. Because you can't afford everything, and some things got the green light to go forward in full speed. other things, hey, look, why we still have to complete these projects eventually. We're not abandoning them outright, but it's just going to have to be put on the back burner for other things. And so, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, Epcot needs an attraction dearly, probably more than Magic Kingdom at this point, especially with the construction going on in Epcot. They really, really need an attraction. They really, really need something that kind of brings it home and says, "Hey, look, this is a new Epcot," because that corridor, that kind of courtyard, where Inventions was and so forth, Community Core. That just, I mean, it's going to take a while for those things to come out. So I think that's kind of some of the reasons why, and plus too, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind has been worked on for so long. It was far closer to completion. I think that's why they prioritized that right first. But then you have Harmonious, and man, that's a very interesting story too. I mean, it was originally the barges were going to be able to move, and then when they weren't, that's caused some operational headaches. I don't know. I know a lot of people are upset about aspects of that right now, but really, Epcot is real. It's really important that really gets going. That really comes to full fruition. There's so much money being invested in there. You really have to pay it off to your most loyal fans, and I think that's why Epcot has been prioritized in that way. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that couldn't have come at a better time at a worse time, if that makes sense. It's like everything had to be set in stone, where the groundwork had to start for them to say, you know what, we've got this far, we can't just leave it now. So, and
Yeah.
that even goes for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway at uh for Disneyland, is because the groundwork is pretty much already done, and to make another replicant of another ride, it
Yeah,
costs less than starting fresh with something completely new. So
absolutely. And from what I understood, I mean, it was a no brainer that Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway was going to make it into Disneyland. I mean, when Imagineers and executives saw the concept, saw the technology, it was like, oh my, this has huge potential, huge hit. You can make changes, much easier conceivably. You can update it. It just has so many, it's just so many use cases, so much potential. So they were really blown away by it, and it was just like, wow, we really want this in Disneyland. And from what I understand, it was like, okay, this is going in not just in Disneyland, but in every single resort around the world. It's that, I mean, they're just so blown away by it. And relative to other things, other technologies, I mean, it's it does have upside in that installation, and everything is much more variable. It can be, the installation can be flexible for every single resort. It's more cost effective. It's just there's so much upside to it that it was just like, wow, this is really stunning. And from what I understand, the executives out in Tokyo, the Oriental Land Company, you know, those executives are really kind of, they're a little bit. How do I put this? If they're gonna pay for anything, it's got to be really, really good, right? They're just not gonna take. They're just not going to take anything you throw at them. I mean, they're really choosy, really picky with what they purchase for their parks. And they showed Avatar to them. They said, "Hey, look, look at these amazing facilities. Look at this amazing world. This would be perfect for Tokyo and so forth." And they balked. They said, "That's not good enough. That's not where we want to go." But when they showed Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, it was like, "Yes, we'll take one. Like right now. Like right now." So it really is something. It really is pretty incredible that this has kind of lit the fire for so much. And from what I understand, that this technology might take place in various other forms too, as we'll see in the future.
and I think that, with every Disney resort, whether it's domestically or internationally, I think every at least one park deserves Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, because it's essentially being the very first ride based off of Mickey Mouse. You had a lot of like meet and greets and everything, shows, what have you, but the very first ride through attraction of Mickey Mouse, and it holds the most hidden Mickeys in any other kind of attraction in a Disney park.
Oh, it's great, you know, and it's really great that you said that, because the whole idea for Mickey's Birthday Land, or Mickey's Starland, Mickey's Toontown Fair, Mickey's Toontown, and Disneyland, the whole notion was, where do you go to meet Mickey? You know, there's really no place that is kind of dead set. You know, this one location where you can meet him, and you know, City Hall would receive complaints all the time about, like, man, where do I go to see Mickey for my family? You know, if he's not on the, you know, character guide that cast members keep in their pocket, and I don't see him at that time, you know, where can I meet him? And so they really needed a set place where families could go at any time and see Mickey Mouse, and that was kind of the birth of Mickey's Toontown. That was the idea of Mickey's Toontown, was to give those families an opportunity to meet the mouse. And so now that you're bringing a full bore attraction into his land, I mean, I think it's incredibly cool, incredibly special, and it really is awesome. I mean, it took a while, but we eventually got a Mickey Mouse attraction. It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said about meeting Mickey Mouse, that was where I essentially met Mickey for the very first time. But at Disney World, it was at Mickey's Toontown Fair. And,
Mhm.
you know, because again, when we asked the cast member, where can we meet Mickey? Oh, well, Mickey and the gang, they have their own section at this part of the park and everything. And it was kind of a sad time, like when they said Mickey's Toontown Fair was essentially going to become, well, at the time, Pixie Hollow, and then Pixie Hollow became Storybook Circus. So it's
Yeah, it's really interesting about that Pixie Hollow, that whole thing with New Fantasyland. You know, doing some research for this segment, you know, this is kind of an interesting kind of factoid. Um, at the Big Top Souvenirs, as it is now known today, right? It was known as, I believe, County Bounty back in the day.
yes, yes.
Yeah, is that correct? Okay, I was just making sure. Well, initially for New Fantasyland, and, you know, they were going to have the Pixie Hollow section. They were going to have this kind of real estate used for those kind of purposes. Well, Magic Kingdom Ops came back and said, "Whoa, slow the phone here. You're going to get rid of County Bounty? Uh, 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 I mean, you can't do that." And the Imagineers were taken aback, like, what is so special about this store? You don't understand, guys. And all Walt Disney World property and the whole entire resort, from what I understand, this shop does more business than the Emporium. I mean, it was massively, well, not more business than the Emporium. It was the second to the Emporium. It just massively successful for them. And there's a couple of reasons that go into that, but it was just, we have to keep this. Somehow we have to make this work. And that's where you had the kind of circus come out of. It was okay. It was all about really keeping County Bounty, and now it's Big Top Souvenirs, and, you know, business is kind of changing that area, but I mean, it's still incredibly successful for them, and they got it. They got their wish, and that's why we don't have Pixie Hollow, which probably for the best.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's nice to see that even though it became Storybook Circus, you could still see those elements of how the design was for Mickey's Birthday Land, then Mickey's Star Land, and then Mickey's Toontown Fair. So you
Right.
could still see that notion of it, but it just more so became sort of Dumbo themed, so to speak. I guess that's what
Yeah.
you call it.
And as a result of keeping those things, I mean, some people will say, "Oh, that's kind of cheap." Well, no. They were able to apply that budget to other things. You know, we have an incredible facade and experience for The Little Mermaid. We have an incredible ride, and, you know, Snow White's what is it, the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. And so, you know, I mean, these things, you know, sometimes you save a little here, but you spend big in other places. So, I think it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree.
Mhm.
And again, I think kind of to sum everything up, it's like Toontown for me is, especially at Disneyland Park, it's like at some point a Disney park needs Toontown because of its original conception. It was supposed to be for everyone to meet Mickey Mouse and the gang, and it's sort of like it gives them a permanent home in all of the parks, so it can, you know, so it stands the test of time. So no matter how much it changes, no matter how much it evolves, that you could still say that it holds that that same groundwork when they first initially announced the concept for Toontown.
I think you always need a home for Mickey Mouse, you know, whether it's the former Toontown or anywhere else. And I think Toontown's the most organic place for him to be. So preferably it would be that. And, you know, I think as long as they maintain it, as long as I keep it up, as long as I keep painting those facades, which do, you know, they do wear in both the Floridian and California sun. You know, as long as they keep it up, I think it'll be an incredible place. I mean, it's sad to see where Toontown has fallen. You know, all these kind of interactive elements have been disabled or turned off or removed. The ball pit, like I said, was removed. The Goofy's house and Donald's house were significantly changed. But I think as long as you kind of maintain that kind of like, hey, look, this is a place for families, a place for kids, and a place for people to meet Mickey and kind of uphold that as best you can, I think it'll be relevant for years to come. So here's hoping.
Yep, definitely. Let's cross our fingers on that one. So on that note, I want to thank you for joining me today. It was a very good, again, in-depth conversation and a lot of generalized facts that honestly I didn't even really know about too much. Because again, I know of Disneyland, but it's like I don't know it as well as I do Walt Disney World. But it's definitely a something that we definitely have to keep an eye on to see how Toontown continues to evolve and grow with the start of this sort of new rebirth, so to speak, of the land with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And again, I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you want to let the watchers and listeners know where they could find you.
Well, you know, you just said that that you know Walt Disney World and well, I really know Disneyland more than Walt Disney World, so I think we complement each other. But the best place to find me is going to be at VashSky. So that's at V as in Victor, ASHSKY on Twitter. That's the best place to find me, best place to interact with me. I'm also going to be uploading some projects very soon to Orange Grove's channel. That's Orange Grove on YouTube, Orange Grove 55 on YouTube. So that's gonna be really, really cool. I can't wait to show you guys, and I'm really excited. So it's gonna be fun.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you again for tuning in. And as always, remember, stay healthy, stay safe, stay Disney. Bye, everybody.